Smoke claws at the night sky like desperate fingers, thick and acrid, carrying the bite of cedar and myrrh twisted into something foul. You hear at first a low roar, a beast devouring wood and stone, punctuated by the sharp cracks of beams giving way, the distant wail of a woman whose voice fractures into silence. Then the heat rolls in, a wall of it, singeing the air before the glow paints the horizon crimson. Shadows twist across the grand terrace, where colossal guardians, winged bulls with human faces, stand frozen in their eternal watch, their eyes reflecting the inferno that consumes the palace behind them. A soldier stumbles past, his arms laden with gold chalices that clink like mocking laughter, his face smeared with soot and something darker, triumphant. He doesn't see you, huddled in the alcove's gloom, your silk robes torn, the weight of a lifetime's whispers now ash in your throat. The air tastes of salt and fear yours, and thousands like it. This is no storm from the gods, this is the end of a world, and it has only just begun. What follows is a tale of fire and erasure, drawn from the bones of history. It touches on violence against women, the machinery of conquest that turns lives into spoils. These shadows are real, etched in clay tablets and scorched stone. If the weight pulls too heavy, pause here. Honor that. For those who stay, we walk not to gloat over ruin, but to see the gears that ground empires and souls into dust. Step away if you must. The story waits. From the hook's blaze, pull back, breathe. The year is 330, that bitter winter when snow still clung to the Zagros peaks like a shroud. Alexander of Macedon, barely 30, eyes sharp as the spear he never set down, had shattered the Persian heartland. Not with a single blow, but a cascade. Issus in 333, where Darius fled like a hare. Gaugamela the year before, where 40,000 Persian lives, bought Alexander a path to this moment. Persepolis wasn't just a city, it was the Achaemenid pulse, a terrace hewn from living rock, rising like a god's throne amid plains that bloomed gold in spring. Darius the Great had carved it 2 centuries prior, a monument to unity tributaries from every corner of his realm, from Nubian gold-bearers to Scythian horse-archers, ascending those famed stairs in eternal procession. But unity demands tribute, and tribute breeds envy. The Greeks whispered of it as the city of the Persians, a glittering wound from the wars of old, when Xerxes had torched Athens in 480, leaving Acropolis in flames. This wasn't conquest born of whim. It was a machine, oiled by grudge and gold. Philip of Macedon, Alexander's father, had forged the League of Corinth in 338, binding Greek city-states in a vow of vengeance against the East. Athens' ruins still scarred the soil. Thebes had risen and fallen to Alexander's boot just months before, its men slaughtered, women parceled like chattel. Persepolis loomed as the final ledger, 120,000 talents of silver and gold stacked in its vaults, enough to fund a decade of war. Alexander's men, ragged from marches across Anatolia and the Hindu Kush's shadow, smelled not just wealth, but reckoning. He entered the gates unopposed, the satrap surrendering with bowed head, the garrison melting into the hills. For 3 months, the Macedonians camped amid splendor, audience halls echoing with lyres, gardens where roses defied the frost. But beneath the calm, gears turned. Scouts reported Darius rallying in the east. Whispers of rebellion stirred in Bactria. Leave the treasure, it mocked him. Destroy it, that sealed the break. This wasn't madness, a king's fevered whim. This was accounting cold, deliberate, the erasure of a system's root. The Persians had built an empire on satraps and tribute, a web from the Nile to the Indus. Alexander would burn the ledger, scatter the threads, and weave his own. Why Persepolis? Because it symbolized not just power, but permanence. Its flames would echo the Acropolis's pyre, closing a century's circle. And in that closing, the human cost women like you, in the alcove, guardians of hearth and lineage, became the ink on the page. They weren't footnotes. They were the story's silent spine. What Alexander unleashed wasn't vengeance alone. It was the machine of empire devouring its own excess, leaving ghosts in the glow. Alexander wasn't forged in fire. He was tempered by it, from the cradle. Born in Pella, 356, under a sky bruised by eclipse, his mother Olympias claimed Zeus himself had sired him, a thunderbolt's echo. Philip, the bulldog king, hammered Macedonia from tribal squabble to spear tip of Greece. But home was no ideal. Olympias, Epirote witch queen in Macedonian eyes, clashed with Philip's other wives, her son the prize in their shadows. At 12, Alexander tamed Persepolis, the black stallion no man could ride, whispering to its fear of shadow, turning terror to trust. That horse carried him to 32, through dust and blood. Aristotle tutored him at Mieza, 3 years of scrolls under oak, Homer's rage, Plato's forms, the ethics of rule. To the strongest, the philosopher etched. But Alexander heard to the wise conqueror. Philip's campaigns dragged the boy east against Illyrians in 340, where he charged at Chaeronea in 338, 16 and already tasting command's edge. Formative fractures came swift. Philip's murder in 336, dagger in theater shadows Alexander, 20, crowned amid plots, purging rivals with a surgeon's cut. Olympia's hand suspected but unspoken. Then Thebes, 335. The city revolted, dreaming Spartan aid. Alexander raised its 6,000 dead in streets, 30,000 sold to slavery. The poet Pindar's house spared as nod to muses. Mercy? No. Message. The machine clicked. Resistance invites oblivion. Eastward, Issus tested him. Darius's host, vast as locusts, but Alexander flanked, broke them. The Persian king's tent yielded spoils, purple robes, gold chariots, and his family. Sisygambes, the queen mother, prostrated in grief, mistaking Hephaestion for her son. Alexander lifted her, mother to both. Kindness, or calculus, win the court, claim the throne, but cracks showed. Paraphernalia, his old general, questioned the push east. Alexander had him poisoned in 330, the year of Persepolis. Loyalty frays under ambition's weight. By the gates of Persis, Alexander was no boy king. He was the machine incarnate, brilliant, brittle, burning with a fire that spared no fuel. And then the Persian gates happened. Ariobarzanes, satrap of Persis, held the pass of Thermopylae in reverse, narrow defile walled with stone, 15,000 Persians barring the way. Alexander's frontal assault bled Macedonian blood. 200 elite companion cavalry lost in the first charge. Rain lashed the crags, turning paths to mire. He feigned retreat, sent a herdsman local trader, eyes hungry for gold, to guide a flanking force over goat tracks under moonless sky. Dawn broke with steel in the rear. Ariobarzanes' line shattered, the satrap fleeing to his death. Persepolis lay open, its silhouette a mirage against dawn's chill. Alexander paused at the terrace's foot, Bucephalus snorting mist. This was no mere city. It was the culmination, the heart he would rip free to still its beat. The machine, oiled by Aristotle's logic and Philip's iron, now demanded its due. What came next wasn't triumph's roar. It was the quiet grind of gears, turning splendor to slag. Winter's grip loosened as spring crept in, but the air in Persepolis hung heavy, laced with jasmine from hidden courtyards and the faint rot of fear. The terrace sprawled like a god's handprint, 50 acres of limestone platforms, flights of stairs broad as rivers, flanked by Lamassu guardians whose beards curled like smoke. At its crown, the Apadana hall, where Darius had welcomed envoys with wine and wisdom, now echoed Macedonian boots. Alexander quartered in Xerxes' palace, walls sheathed in ivory and lapis, floors mosaicked with lions chasing prey. His men 30,000 strong, a polyglot host of Thessalians, Thracians, Greeks sprawled in the lower town, tents blooming like warts on the plain. The satrap's surrender had been bloodless. Inhabitants, perhaps 20,000 souls, bartered safety for submission. Merchants shuttered stalls heavy with saffron and silk. Priests in the fire temples murmured to Ahura Mazda, their flames flickering low. Amid this fragile peace lived Sera, daughter of a lesser noble from the far's heartland. 20 summers had etched her soft, with eyes like polished onyx and hair coiled in braids threaded with pearls, gifts from a mother lost to fever. She served in the women's quarters, a wing of the palace veined with fountains and rosewater pools, where royal attendants wove tapestries of conquests undone. Sera's days blurred in rhythm, dawn ablutions in milk-scented steam, afternoons grinding pistachios for sweets that sweeten no one's tongue these days. She dreamed of her brother's letters from Susa, tales of the queen's grace, Statiera's laughter like bells, Marriage whispers had come to a scribe in Babylon, but war's shadow stilled them. Sera hummed old hymns as she folded linens, her fingers tracing the embroidered lions that guarded the realm. She was no queen, no symbol, just a thread in the weave, strong and unseen. Her laughter lit the alcoves, drawing smiles from elder maids who called her little son. In quiet hours, she sketched birds on scraps of parchment, wings unbound, yearning for skies beyond the terrace's rim. Life, for Sera, was a gentle current until the current turned to torrent. Tension coiled like a bowstring drawn taut. Alexander's council murmured in lamplight. Parmenion, grizzled fox, urged caution fortify, hold the gold against Darius's ghost. But Alexander paced, maps unfurled, his gaze fixed east where the king rallied. The vaults bulged bullion stacked to ceilings, gems winking like fallen stars. Leave it? Folly. His men, unpaid since Tyre, eyed it with wolf hunger. Whispers spread. The Greeks demand fire for Athens. Symposia stretched nights, wine from Chios flowing red as prophecy. Thais, Athenian courtesan with honeyed voice and coal-rimmed eyes, held court among the officers Ptolemy's flame. Her wit a blade, she spun tales of Xerxes' hubris, temples razed, women dragged to chains. "Let us repay," she toasted, cup raised. Alexander laughed, but his eyes darkened. Sera heard the revels from the quarters, flutes wailing, laughter spiking sharp. Guards at the doors grew lax, tongues loosened by Macedonian coin. One eve, as equinox neared, a captain broad as a bull, beard braided with lute banged at the wing's gate. "The king bids tribute," he slurred, eyes roving. Sera's heart stuttered. The elders pushed forward, veils drawn. But the demand sharpened. Jewels, linens, the women themselves as gifts to seal the peace. Refusal came quiet, fierce. Sera's handmaiden, old Miriam, barred the door with her body. "We serve the sun and fire, not foreign spears." The captain's face twisted rage, or lust, or both. Blows rained, the gate splintered, chaos bloomed, screams threading the air, silk tearing like flesh. Sera fled to the alcove, pulse thundering, clutching a shard of mirror that caught the first torch's gleam. The act blurred hands rough as sand, breaths hot with wine, the world narrowing to violation's vice. No blade's kiss, just the slow theft of self, implied in the dawn's hush. Bodies slumped, alcoves stained, the women's wing, once sanctuary, now a scar. Sera curled amid shards, breath ragged, the mirror's edge biting her palm. Blood welled, warm and real, her anchor to what remained. Word rippled like fire through straw. By noon, the terrace buzzed, soldiers boasting in the Apadana's shadow, elders wailing in the streets. Alexander heard in council, face stone. Not outrage, no, calculation. They take what victors claim, he decreed, turning to maps. But cracks spidered. Hephaestion, his shadow self, pressed mercy. Thais, eyes gleaming, urged the blaze. This wasn't about Sera, a name lost to ledgers. It was the system unspooling conquest's logic, where bodies buy loyalty, gold funds the next gate. Women as spoils, cities as pyres, the machine's fuel. Historians later pored over clay seals from the vaults, tallying talents but silent on souls, yet echoes linger. In our age, when armies secure quarters with the same cold math, we see it anew, not ancient excess, but the blueprint of erasure. Sera's mirror shard? It reflects us still, sharp and unforgiving. But that wasn't the worst part. As April's blooms unfurled, the machine accelerated, gears slick with not just gold, but grudge. Shift the lens now from the women's wing to the officer's tent, where a mid-rank captain named Eudoxus nursed a gash from the gates, his promotion hanging on Persepolis' yield. He wasn't Alexander's inner circle, no Hephaestion to whisper policy. Just a cog, Thracian-born, risen on spear thrusts, now tasked with inventory in the lower town. Reports chained up the line, satrap to general, general to king, like links in a satrap's yoke. Incentives gleamed, a talent's share for diligence, a lash for delay. Eudoxus rode out at dawn, 50 horse behind, to the villages clinging the plain's edge. Tribute, he barked at headmen, but eyes lingered on granaries, herds, and daughters veiled in doorways. Spread came swift, insidious. First the outskirts, hamlets emptied under equinox moon, men conscripted or cut down, women herded like goats to camp followers' wagons. Not blades alone, fear did the work, whispers of Thebes' fate. Eudoxus tallied 200 souls from one cluster, relocated to labor on roads east. Incentives bit, his cut-bought armor chased in silver, a girl from Persis to warm his bedroll. Up the chain, reports bloomed, Ptolemy logging assets secured, Alexander nodding over wine. The machinery hummed, satraps in Media got wind, quelling unrest with tribute hikes. In Bactria, rebels paused, weighing the cost. Numbers breathed human, a potter's kiln cold, his widow clutching shards, a weaver's loom tangled, threads of blue like bruised sky. Whole clans vanished into the host's maw, feeding the beast that marched to India. One moment etched sharp, from Eudoxus's view, a hillside shrine, flames low, where a priestess veiled, unbowed, barred his path. Not royal, no Sera's grace, but fierce, staff raised like spear. The fire sees all, she spat. His men laughed, torches kindled, the shrine bloomed orange, her form a silhouette swallowed. Eudoxus rode on, stomach sour, but the report read clean, resistance neutralized. Breather came at dusk, ironic twist. A Macedonian lyre player strummed beside a captured fountain, water clear as before, while a Persian boy spared for his voice sang of lions in the reeds. Beauty amid the grind, a dark jest, the empire's songs outlasting its singers. Yet the shift pressed. From wing to town, noble to common, the system scaled, devouring not just Persepolis, but its roots. Eudoxus dreamed that night of gears, endless, turning on women's cries. Dawn brought orders. Prepare the palace. The machine, insatiable, turned home. What happened next would alarm the very stones. May's heat baked the terrace, dust devils dancing like omens. The revel swelled Alexander's symposia, a storm of Chian wine and Ionian flutes. Officers sprawled on Persian rugs, thick as sin. Thais, flame-haired, wove through, her gown diaphanous as smoke, voice a siren's call. "For Athens!" she cried, torch aloft, eyes locking Alexander's. He rose, unsteady, the hall's shadows leaping like hounds. The palace of Xerxes cedar, beams fragrant, murals of immortals eternal fed the blaze first. Flames licked lapis walls, gold leaf curling black. The roar drowned screams from below, where looters surged unchecked. Time stretched, molasses slow. A beam groaned, toppling in slow arc, sparks birthing stars. A maiden's veil ignited mid-flight, her shadow fleeing the gate. Sensory tide crashed heat-blistering skin, smoke-choking lungs like grave earth, the acrid tang of melting ivory mingling with sweat and fear. Alexander watched from the stairs, torch in hand, Hephaestion at elbow, regret flickering, or triumph. The Apadana caught next, its columns cracking like thunder gods slain. The act crested not in gore, but scaled the terrace a pyre for an age. Thousands fled the flames, attendants clutching babes, nobles in chariots splintering on stairs. No count survives, but chronicles whisper near 50,000 souls touched women herded to camps, virgins of the court parceled as concubines, their purity a victor's jest. Implication hung heavy, alcoves emptied, lineages snapped like reeds. Sera, if she stirred from stupor, saw it through haze, flames devouring her sketches, the women's wing a maw of orange. But the crack came subtle, the overreach's whisper. A tablet, sealed in vault's depths, survived the heat. Persepolis fortification archive. 2,000 clay shards tallying tribute from Darius's day. Unburned, they mocked the blaze, the machine's records outlasting its masters. Alexander turned away, face ashen. Hephaestion murmured of excess. Resistance flickered not swords, but silence. A maid's unyielding gaze as chains clicked, a noble's curse in fire-lit dark. The system bent, not broke women's whispers seeding doubt in Macedonian ranks. Tales of ghosts in the glow haunting dreams east to the Hydaspes. That crack echoed, a fault line in the conqueror's crown. But the machine ground on, flames dying to embers by dawn, Persepolis a husk under grieving sky. Alexander marched east that summer, Bactria's winds erasing ash from his cloak. Fate caught him swift. Fever in Babylon, 323, whispers of poison or excess. 32, undone not by blade, but body's betrayal. His empire fractured Ptolemy to Egypt, Seleucus to Syria, the Diadochi carving his dream to bone. The women, Sisygambis, queen mother spared at Issus, starved in grief upon word. Statira, wed to Alexander at Susa, slain in the war's wake. Common souls like Sera vanished to ledgers, sold to Greek markets, or scattered to villages, birthing half-bloodlines that blurred the East's edge. Power shifted seismic. Satraps rose as kings. Greek cities Persianized in reverse. Long-term, Hellenism bloomed, but scarred libraries at Alexandria hoarding Persian scrolls, even as Persepolis's pyre warned of cultural pyres. Ironic twist. The treasures Alexander hauled 20,000 mules, groaning, funded the very fusion he torched against. Bactrian brides for Macedonian spears, a mongrel empire from mongrel seed. Persepolis slumbered under rubble, a ghost terrace where jackals howled Xerxes' name. Dawn broke over Fars a century later, but true light came in 1931, when Ernst Herzfeld, German archaeologist, eyes keen as a falcon's trod the terrace's hush. Funded by Chicago's Oriental Institute, he brushed dust from the Apadana stairs, revealing friezes frozen mid-procession, Medes with bows, Ionians with fish. No gold, no ghosts, just stone whispering of unity Alexander had deemed foe. By 1934, Erich Schmidt took the helm, trench by trench unearthing the vaults. 30,000 tablets, clay contracts from Darius's scribes, tallying grain for the king's women. Herzfeld, chain-smoking amid shards, pieced a tablet naming attendance echoes of Sera's world, lives inked before flame. In 1979, UNESCO crowned it heritage, barriers rising against time's thief. Tangible now, a shard in your hand, cool and etched, carrying a queen's seal. Herzfeld died in 1948, exile from war's folly, but his find proved the pyre incomplete. The system's bones endured, mocking erasure's hubris. Why does it matter, this ash 2 millennia cold? One parallel grounds it: modern sieges, where cities like Aleppo burn not for grudge, but strategic denial, treasuries torched, quarters secured, women as collateral in the calculus, not ancient echo, but blueprint. It teaches power's brittleness. Machines devour makers, leaving cracks for memory to seep. Resistance, not always swords, Sera's unvoiced curse. A tablet's survival. The archaeologist's trowel. Human nature bends but doesn't break. In the glow's wake, we rebuild. Not with gold, but grit. Transcends the blaze. Empires rise on unity's myth, fall to its denial. Persepolis wasn't lost. It waits, in every unburned story, for us to listen. Return to that alcove, mirror shard and fist. The flames have died, terrace scarred but standing, lions on stairs gazing east as ever. Sera, if she lived, slipped the chains, perhaps, vanishing to a village where roses still bloomed. Her birds, sketched in mind, winged free. The machine ground to halt in Babylon's fever dreams. But its echoes, they whisper in our wars, our ledgers. They were meant to vanish 50,000 shadows, royal daughters and hearthkeepers, erased in conquest's math. But they didn't. Clay tablets hoard their tallies, friezes etch their processions, archaeologists' hands pull them from dust. Memory, that stubborn weed, roots in ruin. And now they're here, with you because you chose the light over the blaze. In their gaze, see the cost of crowns, the quiet fire of those who endure. If this tale stirred something, comment below. What empire's ghost haunts you most? Your voice fans the embers. Then, breathe. Let silence fall. The story survives in the hearing.